Hey Sydney,
Hi, Edgar.
how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Do you know about how many people are expected to show up today?
I am not too sure.
I
Yeah, I
guess
didn't get it.
there's not really any way to
Yeah,
tell.
usually for the housing element, a lot of people will like sign up, but for this one, I don't. There was no way for me to tell.
Hmm. Okay.
Let me just admit the translator. I think that's her interpreter.
Okay.
Hey Jeanette. Oh, I think she's still joined. Hey Jeanette, can you hear me?
Hi, this is Jeanette. I can hear you.
Awesome. Let me um add you as an interpreter,
Okay.
and then we can test to see if it works.
All right.
Perfect. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. I'm gonna switch back. Sydney, I also wanted to let you know, I don't think Melanie's gonna be able to join at this meeting.
Okay.
I know Jamie's joining. Um, she went home, so I think she'll be joining from home. But yeah, Jamie will be here.
Okay. Do you know if Jamie's planning to kick off the meeting like Melanie usually does?
Yeah, let me ask her. I haven't confirmed with her, but if not, I can probably just kick it off. If she...
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, if you can, you or Jamie can do the kind of introductions and then you can introduce the interpretation slide as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Hi, Darren.
Hey, Darren.
Hello.
Hey, Sydney, do you want me to start letting people in? I don't think Jamie's on yet, but uh,
Yeah, we can start letting people in
okay.
at 6 o'clock. Let them know that we'll wait a couple minutes before we start the meeting.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're gonna give it a couple more minutes just to get some more people to join us, and then we'll kick off the meeting. All right, Sydney, I think if you're good with sharing the presentation, I think we can probably start.
Sure, yeah.
Awesome.
One second. Safety element and the county's recent multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. This updated safety element will look at seismic and other geologic hazards, which will also include secondary impacts of this hazard on dam failure in the county. We'll discuss flooding and drainage, which will cover the FEMA flood zones and include secondary impacts on mud flows and debris flows, and agricultural hazards. We'll look at dam inundation and downstream effects for each major dam in the county in the event of dam failure. We'll discuss sea level rise and coastal hazards, including coastal flooding and erosion. Severe storms, which will cover extreme precipitation and high winds, as well as risks to public infrastructure. We'll talk about drought and extreme heat with secondary impacts on drought, wildfire, and agricultural hazards. We'll look at fire hazards, including both wildfire and other fire hazards. And then finally, we'll discuss emergency preparedness and emergency response. In accordance with state law, the effects of climate change on each of these hazards will be included in the discussion, and climate change or climate adaptation and resilience strategies will be included in the element's goals and policies. So the hazards that were ranked of highest concern in the community survey were these shown on the screen: fire, drought and water supply, extreme weather events occurring outside of the normal season, and heavy rain and flooding. Additionally, evacuation during a fire or other hazard event was ranked as a top concern from community survey participants. So in identifying the hazards of concern for the county, we have mapped some of these hazards and where they occur across the county. For example, this map shows the FEMA flood zones and floodways in the county as mapped by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So as you can see, some of the largest flood zones in the county go along the Salinas River. And so we're using this to describe hazards in the county, where and how they occur. And another map that I wanted to show you all is this map of fire hazard severity zones as identified by CAL FIRE. So the red areas are these very high fire hazard severity zones. The orange ones are high, and moderate is shown in yellow. And it should be noted that these are the state responsibility areas, so that the areas that the state is responsible for providing fire protection to, and CAL FIRE is currently updating the local responsibility areas across California, which is why there are these gray areas shown along the 101 here instead of any fire hazard severity zones shown there. All right, so we will also be incorporating the results of an emergency evacuation route analysis that will be prepared specifically for the safety element update in accordance with state law. The purpose of the emergency evacuation route analysis is to identify evacuation routes and assess the capacity, safety, and viability of those routes under a range of emergency scenarios, as well as to identify residential developments in hazard areas that do not have at least 2 emergency evacuation routes, or in other words, neighborhoods or households that have limited accessibility, and to identify evacuation locations in the county. So these items are required by state law to be identified as part of the safety element update. And if you're interested, the Assembly Bill or Senate Bill numbers that include these requirements are listed on the slide. And you can learn about them more online. All right, for our evacuation analysis, we will split the county up geographically into evacuation zones as shown on this map. These zones are consistent with the County Office of Emergency Services evacuation zones and would help us to look at these areas of the county more closely. As required by state law, we will analyze evacuation conditions for several different hazard scenarios, including a fire starting from outside of the county, fire starting from an area within the county, and even fire starting from several different locations within the county, as has occurred before, specifically during the 2020 fires in the county. We will also look at evacuation conditions during other hazards such as tsunami, flood from extreme precipitation, and flood from dam failure. All right, so now we are going to start asking you to participate in some live polls. You can use the QR code on the screen and take a picture of it with your phone camera if you're on your phone, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code that's shown here on the screen. I will wait a minute or two to let you all join. And these polls that we have, they'll be provided in both English and Spanish. The joining instructions will also be included on the next page. So I'm just going to wait a little bit longer and then we'll move on and you can still see the joining instructions on the side of the next page. All right, moving on to the first question. So just to get a feel of who is here attending this meeting, we want to know who is from one of the, oh, excuse me. We're actually going to move on to this question later because we haven't showed the disadvantaged communities yet. Or we'll do it now because we have these communities shown on the slide here. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
I think we can do it now since everyone I think is familiar with some of these
Great.
communities.
Yeah. Thank you, Edgar. So we'll see who is from one of these disadvantaged communities that are identified in Monterey County. We'll show you these disadvantaged communities a little bit later in the presentation. And we want to know who is joining from other communities in the county. So we have several communities as answers in this poll. And then there's also an option for other communities. If you'd like to add your community to the chat, then we can save that information there. Great. So it looks like we have several people from the Salinas area and some other communities. Would love to hear what communities you're from if you'd like to type it in the chat. The chat function on Zoom, sorry. Great, thank you everyone for responding. It looks like our responses have slowed down, so I'll move on to the next question. All right, so we'd like you to rank which hazards concern you the most of the ones that we just discussed. So we have seismic and geologic hazards, flooding, dam failure, sea level rise and coastal hazards, severe storms, drought, and I think there might be a few others. I can't see them on my screen right now. So far, it's looking like fire hazards is the top concern for people in Monterey County, followed closely by flooding and drought. Great, thank you everyone for responding. And I should mention that we are saving all of the results that we received from these live polls today, so we can save and export this data, and we're going to use it in order to describe which hazards are of greatest concern and pay a little bit more attention to those hazards in the safety element, including for the goals, policies, and strategies. All right, thank you everyone. Moving on, are there any are there other hazards that you would like to see discussed in the safety element besides the ones that we just ranked? This is a word cloud, so if you can put in a word or a short phrase, the more people that use these words or phrases, the word will show up bigger on the screen, and we can get an idea of which other hazards might be even more important to you all. Great, so water contamination. Yes, and water water quality and water contamination is also, and water supply reliability, those will also be discussed in the environmental justice element, but that is certainly, it also ties into drought. So water supply reliability is affected by drought, so we'll definitely be discussing that in the safety element. Loss of power is important for safety and having power during hazardous events. Food security is a good one, and that will be discussed in the environmental justice element as well. I see a couple answers about economic impacts. And Edgar, if you'd like to read the answers that were submitted in Spanish, then please do so.
Yeah, it says water contamination.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
So we have a few more for water contamination.
and then I think the next one is I think it means agriculture kind of runoff, toxins, agriculture toxins.
Oh, okay, great. These are some great answers, everyone. Thank you so much for participating. I'll leave it up for a few more seconds so we can get everyone's answers to this question. Please also know that you can continue answering these questions even if I've moved on to the next slide. So you don't necessarily have to stop answering these questions. But I'll wait a little bit longer. I also see a few answers regarding insurance, insurance options and homeowners insurance. Insurance for, I think for homes, and also some things, I think it's mostly for homes, we are discussing in the environmental justice element as well. So we'll definitely take that into consideration, that we might want to have a greater discussion on insurance. And then there's a few for pesticide sprays, so agricultural contamination or runoff from agricultural operations in the county. and how that affects the water. Great, I think the answers have slowed down, so I'm going to move on to the next question. Thank you again, everyone, for responding. All right. The next question is about evacuation. Do you feel prepared for an evacuation? And this is just a simple yes, no, or I'm not sure, and we'll get into a little bit more about what you might need for an evacuation or what concerns you in the event of an evacuation. Looks like it's neck and neck, yes and no. You may be leaning a little bit more towards no. And that's okay. That's why we're, doing this poll right now, so we can understand what people need for evacuations and the county can start addressing them. So I'm going to move on to the next question. What are your biggest concerns with evacuation? So road closures and unsafe road conditions, that was a really big one that people answered during the community survey. So we wanted to include that here, as well as congestion of roadways, unreliable internet and cell service, where to get evacuation information, transportation and sheltering of your animals, and assistance for people with access and functional needs. Trying to help those people evacuate. They might require a little bit more assistance. All right, so far it looks like road closures and unsafe road conditions is one of the biggest concerns for people in the county. This goes along with, like I said, the answers that we received from the community survey. Followed by congestion of roadways and unreliable internet and cell service. And transportation and sheltering of animals. All right, so we're going to have one more question related to evacuations. Thank you all again for responding to this one. We'll move on. What do you feel you need to be prepared in the event of an evacuation? So this is similar to the last question, but a little bit different in that you can answer what you specifically would like and feel that you need for an evacuation. So information on when and where to evacuate. We got nearby gas stations, modes of transportation to evacuation centers. If you or someone you know doesn't have a car or another way to transport to an evacuation center. Shelters that allow animals. And then again, assistance evacuating people with access and functional needs. So far, it looks like information on when and where to evacuate is the top answer for what people feel they need to be prepared in the event of an evacuation, which makes sense. A lot of times people don't know where or how to get this information. And a lot of times it's information that needs to be received on the fly very quickly, urgently. I'm going to wait a few more seconds on this one. All right, that might be everyone. Thanks again, everyone, for participating. Like I said, we're going to have some more live poll questions after I discuss everything we need to know about the environmental justice element. So please keep Slido handy, because we'll get back into some more questions a little bit later. All right, so on to environmental justice. We'll start with what is environmental justice. The state defines environmental justice as the fair treatment of people of all races, cultures, and incomes with respect to the development, adoption, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but we'll get into a little bit more what environmental justice element does. So first, I mentioned these disadvantaged communities, and I put that in air quotes because that's what the state calls them, that are located in Monterey County. So you can look at the map here as part of the planning process. The state recommends that we identify what they call disadvantaged communities as those areas to focus our environmental justice efforts. And the state defines disadvantaged communities as low-income areas that are disproportionately affected by environmental pollution and other hazards that can lead to negative health effects, exposure, or environmental degradation. And as a result, these communities are more likely to suffer the effects of climate change and pollution compared to other areas. So these areas also typically receive less funding and resources to deal with the effects of these burdens. And the state recommends using 3 different ways to identify these communities. One way is through their own online computer mapping tool called EnviroScreen, which uses different indicators based on population characteristics and pollution to identify communities that are disadvantaged or and disproportionately affected by pollution. And the state also recommends using median household income and HCD income levels as thresholds to identify communities with average income below these thresholds. So approximately 47 of the people who responded to the county's community survey said that they live, work, or are affiliated with one of these communities shown here on the screen. And this high turnout of responses in these communities is really due to the county's efforts to go out to the communities and engage residents who are not traditionally able to participate in local government decisions or the planning processes. All right. So what is an environmental justice element? The purpose of this element is to reduce unique or compounded health risks in disadvantaged communities by increasing civic engagement, promoting public facilities, and prioritizing improvements in programs to meet community needs. Senate Bill 1000 is the state law that requires jurisdictions to identify these communities and incorporate environmental justice policies into the general plan. This law has several purposes, including to facilitate transparency and public engagement in local government's planning and decision-making processes, to reduce harmful pollutants and the associated health risks in environmental justice communities, and to promote equitable access to health-inducing benefits, such as healthy food options, housing, public facilities, and recreation. Once a city or county identifies disadvantaged communities, the state recommends that local agencies work with these communities to understand the existing conditions. This is essentially a snapshot of these existing environmental justice conditions in these communities. And the topic areas that are required to be considered in the element include pollution exposure, including access to clean air and water, like I mentioned before, access to public facilities and services, including access to transit, healthcare, childcare, parks, and other civic facilities, access to healthy food, access to physical activity and recreational opportunities, access to safe and sanitary homes, and exposure to unique or compounded health risks, including climate exposure. So this is the minimum of what needs to be included in the element. And we will talk a little bit more later about what else you might want to see included in the element. First, we're going to go over some of the results of the community survey. So while the existing conditions assessment generally evaluates pollution exposure related to air and water, many community survey responses ranked trash and debris and noise pollution, as well as air pollution from freeways and roadways, as the sources of pollution that they were most concerned about in their communities. In terms of most needed public facilities and services, affordable and reliable internet was ranked as the highest, with parks and open space, both child and senior daycare and activity centers, and health clinics and urgent care ranked high as well on the priority list. While not originally included in, as answers to the survey, 9 people wrote in that road maintenance and repairs are needed, and 8 people wrote in that affordable housing is needed in the county. And then when asked what they need to be healthy, community survey participants responded that they need affordable produce and or assistance for food purchase, and more stores or markets that provide healthy options. Unrelated to food, respondents also said that they need affordable healthcare services and less crime and safer neighborhoods in order to be healthy. While the most common form of transportation chosen during the survey was personal vehicle, most respondents said that more safe bicycle lanes and routes and more sidewalks, crosswalks, and walking paths in their communities would encourage them to walk or bike more. Although we do understand that because, especially in the unincorporated areas of the county, it is very rural in nature, personal vehicle likely continue to be the most common form of transportation. The most common issue that community survey respondents have with their homes is that insurance is not available or affordable to them. Other common issues voted during the community survey were that air conditioning and heating are not available or affordable, and that there are unsafe or unhealthy conditions in their homes, such as mold, poor ventilation, poor insulation, or repairs needed. And then going along with the last required topic to be included in the environmental justice element, for health risks related to climate change, the most concerning effects of climate change voted on during the community survey were wildfire, drought and water supply, extreme weather events, heavy rain and flooding, extreme heat, and then followed by sea level rise and coastal hazards in that order. All right, so I hope you have Slido handy still. We're gonna get into a few more slides. And this time they'll be directed at environmental justice topics. So move on. The joining instructions are still on the left side of the screen if you need help joining back onto Slido. So first poll, please rank the topic areas that concern you the most. And these are the environmental justice topic areas that I just went over. So pollution exposure, this includes water and air pollution, access to public facilities and services, access to healthy food, physical activity and recreational opportunities, safe and sanitary homes, and then I think there might be 1 or 2 more. One of them is health risks related to climate change. I can't see them on my screen here. Looks like so far, air and water pollution are some of the highest concerns. That also goes along with what we were seeing on one of our first live polls, where people wanted to see more information about water pollution and water contamination and the safety element. And like I said, we'll definitely be talking about that as well in this environmental justice element. Let's see, followed by access to healthy food and safe and sanitary homes. Those are really important. Access to public facilities and services. So this includes like things like transit, access to community centers and parks and playgrounds, other, child daycare centers and senior daycare and activity centers, libraries. All right, thank you, everyone. I'll move on to the next question. Are there other or more specific concerns? So in terms of like pollution, would you like there to be more on noise pollution that you think should be addressed in the environmental justice element? This is an open text poll, so anything you say will show up on the screen and move up as people continue to answer. So I see pesticides. And again, and this will definitely tie into pesticides' effect on water and air pollution, and will also be discussed in the safety element as well. Economic impacts, again, that's definitely tied in throughout the environmental justice element. Nitrate contaminated water and soil. And I think that ties into agricultural operations. So we can definitely talk about how those operations affect water quality and the soil. Economic opportunities, that's a good one. Speeding cars and safety in neighborhoods. That one probably ties into the safety element, and we can definitely talk about that one there. See government overreach, animal control, noise pollution, and agricultural land repercussions. Maintenance of the Salinas River. Right. I'll wait here a little bit longer in case anyone else thinks of some other concern that they would like to be addressed in the environmental justice element. The Pajaro levee. So proximity to agricultural operations, spraying announcements, okay? And disturbance of Native American tribal cultural resources. I can see how that would tie into the environmental justice element, definitely. Another answer for overregulation. All right. I'm gonna wait a few more seconds. But I think that that is a good amount of time to spend on this poll. We have one more person typing. another answer for river maintenance. Great. I will definitely consider that. I'm assuming this one is also for the Salinas River. And seeing no other activity, I'll move on to the next question. This one definitely is a lot of text here since it's in both English and Spanish, but I want to say while the state uses the term disadvantaged communities, or we can shorten to DACs, and I've used that term several times throughout the presentation, people in these communities may prefer another term to be used. So the top two options that were voted on during our meetings with the Environmental Justice Community Advisory Committee were disadvantaged communities, or DACs, and also disproportionately burdened communities. So we wanted to ask, what is your preferred term to describe these communities? Or if you have another term, then feel free to pop that in the chat. See that there's some other answers here in the chat that I haven't seen yet. Great. Those answers in the chat, we'll definitely save those as well. Thank you all for responding. And it looks like most of you all here today are voting for disadvantaged communities as the preferred term. It's a little bit less of a mouthful than disproportionately burdened communities. So we'll take that into consideration as well while we're describing these communities in the environmental justice element. All right, moving on. And I think this is our last poll for today. So are there other languages besides English and Spanish that the county should distribute materials in to encourage more participation in community planning from those who are not traditionally able to participate in the planning process? So it's a little bit ironic that we're asking this question in English and it's being translated in Spanish, and we want to know about any other languages. But if you know of other communities or other communities in your community that speak a different language or are not traditionally able to participate in the planning process because they don't receive county materials in their language, then please respond here. If there are any other, again, please type in the chat. Okay, yeah, I see it won't let you choose more than one. So thank you for adding another language in the chat. I also just scrolled back up and saw a couple other terms for disadvantaged communities could be underserved communities or disenfranchised communities. So thank you, Desiree, for providing those options to us as well. All right. I think that's it for poll responses. So I'll move on to our next steps in the planning process. Next opportunities for you to get involved. So at this point, we have prepared the draft hazard profiles for the safety element update and the existing conditions assessment to support the environmental justice element. And we're here at the first committee meeting, as you can see on the slide. So once we draft the goals, policies, and actions for both elements, we will present the results of these during our second community meeting. And once those draft goals and policies, once we get feedback from you all during that community meeting, the second community meeting, we will revise the elements before publishing the draft elements for public review, during which you'll have another opportunity for input on those elements. The county will also host a community open house during this public review period, in which you can learn more about both elements and provide some additional feedback. Once we've incorporated all of this feedback and finalized the safety and environmental justice elements, we'll submit them to the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. And in those meetings, you will have another opportunity to provide comments. So there will be many more chances for you to both learn more about these elements and provide your input on them as well. If you'd like to learn more and stay updated on the elements, you can go to the county HCD Housing and Community Development website and click on General Plan Elements and Updates. And the county will continue to develop that page as we progress through this process. You can also go to the web address shown at the bottom of the slide.
Sydney, before you move on, I think there's a question in the chat and it's asking what the role of the Environmental Justice Advisory Council is.
That's a good question. So we put together two different environmental justice community advisory committees. And like I mentioned, so one of them is made up of community-based organizations and another is made up of community members. And these are just some focused stakeholder groups that we're meeting with throughout this planning process in order to provide them some updates on where we're at in the process, show them our progress on the environmental justice element, and also to receive feedback from them on the element and the planning process as well. So in the first Environmental Justice Community Advisory Committee meetings, we wanted to get a lot of feedback about how to better outreach and reach people in the community who, again, are not traditionally able to participate in the planning process. So, you know, like we asked you today, what languages should we distribute materials in? How do we get out to the community? How should we distribute the community survey that we provided? And what are other ways that we can distribute community survey questions that might not be online in order to get as many answers from people as possible? So that was one of the main goals of our first meeting, as well as to, you know, give them some overview and background on what an environmental justice element is and what it should include. And then in the second meeting with that committee, we presented the results of the community survey that we received once we got all of those results in, asked them some questions about, you know, to ground truth those results that we got in the community survey, and to see if that those answers that we received from the community survey seemed about right. What else? I think that was the main goal of our second committee meeting for the Environmental Justice Community Advisory Committee. That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. I think one thing to know about this Environmental Justice Advisory Committee is that the community members that live in those specific identified disadvantaged communities. So they are really the experts in those communities. So that was a big aspect of forming that committee.
Yeah, thank you, Edgar.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? You can type them in the chat if you'd like, or you can contact Jamie Guthrie. Her phone number and the email address to contact her at for questions on either the safety element or environmental justice element are shown on the screen. My email is shown there as well. I'm Sydney Margallo. So if you have any additional questions, like I said, you can type them in the chat now, or we might be able to unmute you if you'd like to ask your question now, or you can contact either me or Jamie after this meeting with any additional questions or comments. All right, I see another question in the chat. How does this integrate with the county climate action plan? That's a great question. Edgar, can you speak a little bit to that?
I can go ahead and take that.
Yeah, I'm gonna defer this one to Jamie.
Okay, great. Hi,
That's
Jamie.
okay. Thank you, Sydney. So with the climate action plan, that is being prepared by the analyst's office, the county analyst's office, the county administrative office. And that's where the sustainability program lives. It was in the progress of being prepared, and in the process of preparing that, there was oh gosh, Sydney, can you remind me of what the name of the or Darren, there was a document that we were able to utilize for the safety element, and I'm sorry, my brain is has skipped on me a bit, so
we used the climate, I think it's the climate
the vulnerability
action
assessment.
vulnerability assessment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You got
so
it.
Sorry, gosh, that was like last year, right? I don't remember anything from last year. So yes, that is required in the safety element by the state. And so those definitely tie in. And we're also integrated, the safety element is also very much integrated with the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan that the Department of Emergency Management they drafted that, and it was adopted, I think, 2 years ago. And that is also integrated with this safety plan. And that is also by mandate of the state to capitalize on funding for programs that will be able to implement some of the programs in the safety element. The county just had budget workshops, and it's been said that we now have a 12 deficit for the year due to increasing fiscal obligations for the county. That is a very good question. The county prefers not to pass on budget deficit issues. So right now there hasn't been adoption of the budget yet, and that is, I think that's going to happen in the month of May. But it's definitely not protocol to pass on the budget expenses for taxes and whatnot. And I don't think that that's really a legal thing to do anyway. We would have to come to taxpayers with a bond proposal or something specific to the costs to taxpayers. I did want to point out, certainly anyone has other questions, please feel free to chime in. I just want to point out, while we're waiting for someone to maybe develop a question, that we're in the process of the housing element 6th cycle update, and that is going to be the very first draft is expected to be out next month. So do keep your eye out for that, and we welcome all public review of that housing element, and of course that ties in with all of the general plan elements that we're preparing, including the safety element and the new environmental justice element. Well, if anybody, what are the county's policy priority areas? Mr. Duflock, would you be able to be more specific about the question? There's certainly various areas that we will be bringing forth some policies and programs. Is there an area specifically that you're wanting to know about? Well, so I will go ahead and try and answer. Generally speaking, I know with the housing element, policy-wise, of course, we have many state mandates that we need to make sure we're in line with, and through those mandates, our policies and programs will be developed. Many of those policies and programs will have to do with removing barriers to housing production. So that's a very large priority for the county. And the climate action plan development, we have worked with the climate sustainability manager, or I think she's the interim manager with the CAO, and we're working with her to identify policies and programs that the sustainability programs could very well integrate with, and a lot of that has to do with construction of newer homes and how to make those that construction sustainable and as gentle as possible on the environment.
Hey, Jamie, can I offer just one other thing? So the comment about funding too, I wanted to emphasize that once the county has approved these elements, these will make the county more competitive for grant funding for things like addressing the effects of climate change, equity, and outreach. And so there may be some budget issues this year and in coming years, but a big focus of this effort will be on writing and obtaining grant funding to implement a lot of these measures. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Darren. That is a good point. And as I was reviewing the housing plan today in an effort to write a staff report, you know, I counted how many policies and how many programs we have. And so there's something like 50 policies and then more than 70 or so programs. And so very multi-dimensional as far as what those policies and programs address. So as Darren was talking about, part of the programs will be to try our best to apply for grants as appropriate to fund some of these initiatives. Don't see any more questions in the chat. Does anyone want to, well, let's see, you can raise your hand.
Jamie, I see maybe one other question that was in the Q&A.
Okay.
I think it's a different part of the chat.
Got it.
Also from Walt Duflock saying, how will this process be aligned with the vision and goals of the County Board of Supervisors and CAO's office?
Great. Yes, thank you. So as I was saying, the climate, the sustainability manager is with the CAO's office, and really the whole process is being accomplished specifically to address the visions and goals of the Board of Supervisors. So from a safety perspective, housing perspective, so we're doing the housing element to you know, increase the ability of people to live in the county. As we know, it's very expensive, and we just don't have enough housing. We're also, with the safety element, that is, of course, a mandate that the safety element is updated with the housing element. However, it would certainly align with the visions and goals of the Board of Supervisors to really continue to improve on the safety of the residents, especially when we're looking at climate change and those impacts, which will certainly affect the economic health of the county. However, as long as we're on top of it and we stay planning for some of these occurrences that are going to happen with climate change, we'll be able to be resilient, and which is also part of the Board of Supervisors' vision and goals for the county. Okay, we have a comment in the chat about ag. Yes, ag does use a lot of water. However, you know, this is one of those kind of lovely problems. The agricultural industry is an economic driver for the county. And while they do use all the water, it is to produce food. And so one thing we do understand about climate change is that there may be some shifts in what we're able to plant and when we're able to plant, and so being able to create solutions that both help our agricultural industry become sort of part of the solution for climate change resilience. And there has to be a lot more collaboration. And so we're getting through kind of step by step. The climate action plan actually has a considerable amount of data regarding because I don't know exact specifics, I'm just going to say that there was a lot of collaboration on the climate action plan with ag producers. And so I think that there will be some good information coming out of that climate action plan, and we'll continue to work with ag producers to develop solutions to some of the ongoing issues that include water use. Data from Monterey County Farm Bureau. Yes, very true. Yes, thank you, Walt. Yes, so that's yes, that's what I was speaking to as in answer to that question. So oh, okay. Janelle has a nice spicy question there. So without digging too much into what numbers and statistics, while like we said, with the water that goes to ag, it's because it is an economic driver for the county. As far as what is being talked about as the water going into the ocean, I suspect that's a referral to runoff, and so with runoff that actually can be addressed through probably the climate action plan. It's it gets to sort of a larger question of water capture, and where or who owns the water that is, especially its surface water. And so it ends up being a bigger topic of discussion. Yes. Thank you, Colt. These are great questions, and I really do recommend everybody keep an eye out for the community climate action and adaptability plan that's going to be coming out. I think there's they were paused for a little while, but I think they have unpaused and will start work again on that. Okay, well, we have a few minutes left. Are there any lingering questions or comments? Well, seeing none. um, okay, we have one more comment from Mr. Diaz. Ag land runoff into towns and floods neighborhoods and is environmentally dangerous. Oh, wow. Yes. There are some areas in the county that do have some situations with ag land runoff. And there's definitely always a balance. And we can try and we can only try and continue to go for solutions to help keep neighborhoods safe and keep them from flooding. Flooding is one of the hazards that will be talked about in the safety element. And of course, water safety as far as having being loaded with nitrates, or there's water quality issues to be addressed as well. Well, if there are no further questions, I just want to thank all of you for attending this community meeting this evening. And please tell everybody about coming to the next meeting, and also look for other forms of engagement that you could participate in more locally in your communities. We'll have some pop-ups in some communities, and there will be some flyers that will be posted likely at your library as we move along in getting the environmental justice element and the safety element drafted. Well, the safety element update. And if you want to ask further questions, if you think of something later, our contacts are here on the slide in front of you. So really appreciate it. And if that's it, we can get a few minutes back in our evening. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a good night.